Okay, well, Biden's speech was a big nothing burger, but I'm going to pull a few things out of here that we need to be aware of. And then I'm going to talk about the ATF. The ATF is it conspiratorial to say that they actually have a gun registry that is searchable in violation of congressional law because they were able to find the Trump rally shooter who was there with no ID on him by using the serial number of the gun, and they found him in 30 minutes. That's a frightening proposition. Then we're going to talk about the Netanyahu speech. We're going to talk about Tucker Carlson. We've got some great stuff to discuss today. Thank you all for being here. I'm Jared. This is Continue Freedom. Okay, welcome back to Continue Freedom. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. Do me a favor, a huge favor. Hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop me a comment. It's 2 clicks and just say, hey, from wherever you happen to be in. Or if you get to the end of the video and you really like it, let me know what you think. But it really helps us with the algorithm. So first off, Biden's speech, it was a big nothing burger. It was a nothing burger in that we didn't find out why he's actually leaving. Now, I think we all know. If we've been watching him over the past year, we can be fairly certain that it was his, it's his mental state. But as I said in my previous video, I do not believe that he actually released that letter. So it's a combination of 2 things. One, it's his mental state, and he probably could have been threatened with the 25th Amendment if he didn't go along with this. Or he just didn't know until the last minute, and some staffer or some deep state individual published this letter because Megyn Kelly was coming out saying, hey, these handwriting anomalies, she had people on that had been looking at it. I mean, it's a very weird situation, very weird. But nonetheless, Biden is stepping down, and he says, first off, that democracy is at stake. All right, we knew that we were going to hear that because we've been hearing that on a loop for 4 years. We've really been hearing it on a loop for ever since Trump came down the escalator in 2016, that he's going to be a dictator. His democracy is at stake. Let us not forget that when the Democrat Party bestows something on us, it is something that they themselves are doing or whatever. Democracy is at stake. Yes, democracy is at stake. If we continue with this authoritarian government from the left, yes, our democracy is at stake. Now, we're technically a republic, but I won't split hairs over that. He said that this is between hope and hate, unity and division, freedom, justice, and democracy. I tend to agree, actually. Look at who are the people that have burned down cities, who are the people that are rioting and defacing our statues and burning our flags. Hate versus unity? Yeah, I think you can find a little more unity on the right than you can on the left. Now, he says he's going to pass the torch to the next generation, which is apparently Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris is the next generation of big government, establishment, empty suits doing the will of the deep state. Fine. If that's who you want to go with, go for it. But he also said that in his last 6 months, he's going to cure cancer. He's going to stop the war in Gaza. He's going to surpass China. He's going to bring peace to the Middle East. And he already said, so all those are some tall orders: to cure cancer, to surpass China, stop the war in Gaza, and bring peace to the Middle East. Well, we've been trying to bring peace to the Middle East for a few thousand years, so I don't think that's actually going to happen. The closest person that has gotten, or the person that's gotten as closest to peace in the Middle East was Donald Trump, and they ripped up the Abraham Accords as soon as he came into office. Doesn't seem like he's all that concerned about peace in the Middle East. He also said there's going to be Supreme Court reform. What in the world does Supreme Court reform mean? Well, it means term limits on justices. Because with the swinging of our political pendulum, you will eventually get to a point where you have it lined up with a Democrat House, Senate, Supreme Court, presidency, and you can run roughshod over the Constitution. That would be a huge win for them. If we look at the rulings that have been made by the Supreme Court that has a conservative majority, these things have either restored freedoms to the states and to the people, or they have lifted restrictions that have been imposed on them by the federal government, such as Chevron deference and taking away the power of the deep state and the administrative state. Those are huge wins that only came about because we have a more conservative Supreme Court. So if he's able to get something pushed through where they can have term limits or they can increase the number of Supreme Court justices, then they will run roughshod over our Constitution. That will, I believe, mark the end of our republic as we know it. But it's not the case. I think that's just him. There's people been talking about it for years. I just don't think that it's going to be, I think we're a ways off from that. But anyway, Of course, he called January 6th the worst attack since the Civil War. Oh my gosh. As if it, completely forgetting 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. But nonetheless, he said that January 6th was the worst attack since the Civil War. He said he brought manufacturing back to America. Lie. He says border crossings are lower than they've ever been. Lie. He said he's a president for all Americans. Lie, because he has been demonizing half of the American population for his entire 4-year presidency. And lest we forget that he was stumbling, even with a teleprompter, in a 15-minute speech. He couldn't make it all the way through. So I believe the 25th Amendment should have been instituted before this point. It's definitely not going to get pursued now that they've already chosen Kamala Harris. Obama has, and Barack and Michelle have both called Kamala and said, hey, we're going to put our full weight behind you, all this. So the Democrat Party, which has the most ironic name in history, basically completely skipped over the entire democratic process and installed a presidential candidate who has not received a single primary vote. I hope that, Democrats should be really pissed about this, but they don't seem to be, at least what I've seen on social media. They seem to just roll over and say, all right, let's go for it. I'm all for it. Yep, Kamala Harris, whoever you tell me to have as my candidate, I don't need to vote for it. You just tell me, deep state, you tell me. Now, I, on the other hand, and conservatives on the other hand, we believe the democratic process as part of our republic is pretty important. And we believe that, its representation of we the people is vital, absolutely vital to the conduct of business inside of this great nation. Well, we have, however, some deep state entities that have shown their willingness to, I don't know, they don't really care about the Constitution. Laws are recommendations for them. Now they will write them like the ATF has done, just on a whim. Hey, let's just write this law out here and make tens of millions of Americans felons overnight. The ATF has proven their willingness to do things that any other person would say, wait, this is wrong. Like, you can't pass a law without Congress. ATF doesn't get unilateral authority to put people in prison. Are you kidding me? Or to get sentence modifiers by saying, oh, well, you committed a crime, and it's also with something that we just deemed to be a felony a few weeks ago. Now you're really screwed. And by that, I'm talking about bump stocks. I'm talking about pistol braces. We've been fighting this for ages. The ATF pencil whipping regulations. Now, with Chevron deference being overturned, I'm hoping that that's going to quell a lot of that. But in this instance, the Trump shooter was identified in 30 minutes. Let me give you a breakdown on this. And there's a really good video done by Langley Outdoor Academy. And so you should go to his channel and check it out. But in this instance, they had, within 30 minutes, all they had was a serial number for a rifle. And they were able to find that rifle, and the sale of that rifle, rather, 11 years ago in 2013, find the name of the person who made the purchase, which was the father of the shooter, and trace that to the shooter in half an hour. And we're supposed to believe that they did that while manually sifting through documents. Now, they probably had it, based on the serial number. Maybe they said, okay, that serial number, we can track that to this particular year. So we know that it had to have been sometime. But they took data from a closed gun store. And this is how the ATF has built a lot of their data. When gun stores close, they turn over all of their records, everything that they have, to the ATF, and the ATF now catalogs that. And the ATF says, we are the only agency, this is straight from the ATF director's mouth, that we are the only entity, this is what he said, they are the only entity that pays Adobe, so Adobe Acrobat, when you open a PDF file, they pay Adobe Acrobat to give the ATF software that does not have a search function, because that's the only way they can comply with congressional law. And the congressional law is the T-Hart Amendment, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, from 2003. And that amendment did a lot of things, but it said that they prohibited the creation of a national registry of gun owners. It puts restrictions on the ATF's ability to release firearm trace data to the public, and with a few exceptions for like law enforcement agencies and prosecutors. It records, a requirement that records, if I could speak, requirement that records of background checks for gun purchases be destroyed after 24 hours. And it limits the ATF's ability to conduct certain types of inspections of gun dealers. And that's kind of the 10-cent version of it. But they aren't allowed to create a national registry that's searchable. As a result, the ATF pays for a version of Adobe that doesn't have a search function. So when they're scanning in documents, which can now be searchable, I can do it in Evernote or I can do it in other programs. I take a photo of that document, and now that text in that photo of that document is searchable. Well, they said you can't do that. Congress told them they can't do it. Does it seem ridiculous to say, you know what, maybe the ATF, the same organization that's willing to pencil whip laws out of thin air to make tens of millions of Americans felons, would say, you know what, we really need a way to actually do a background search, to do a search of gun owners in the event of a presidential assassination or in the event of a dignitary who has an assassination attempt on them or is assassinated. We need to be able to trace the people, trace the firearms. So let's just set this one system over here. It's not one of the ATF computers necessarily. Let's go ahead and transfer all that data into that one so that it is searchable. That doesn't seem out of that's a hypothetical. It's me making an assumption. How in the world could they have done this? Because they literally keep these documents in shipping containers and in warehouses, in boxes. And when they've got billions, literally billions of pieces of paper, you're not going to find that in 30 minutes. Now, they say that they can generally trace a firearm, probably because of their filing system, whatever that filing system is. They can trace those firearms in about 8 days, normally. If they have an emergency request, they may be able to get it done in 24 hours or less. But 30 minutes from just a serial number to finding out who made that purchase and identify the shooter, that seems strange to anybody else? It certainly seems strange to me. It definitely seems strange to me. And we have to keep in mind, this is why I am so opposed to the administrative state, because in the ATF, in the FBI, in the U.S. Army, in the Air Force, in the, any DOD branch, any government entity is going to be heavily influenced by certain people who are of certain political persuasions, right? There's left-wing people in every branch of government. And Project 2025, the guy, one of the guys who was the co-founder or co-writer of Project 2025, he said that the vast majority of people inside of the federal government are more left-wing. And when you get them into the ATF or you get them into the FBI, you see what we have seen in the past. People saying, you know what, I have zero moral problem with pencil whipping a law and turning my fellow citizens into felons. Or if you're talking about the FBI, I have zero problem putting classified document covers on unclassified documents in order to try to politically prosecute a former president of the United States because I hate him. Because my ideology, which is my politics in that instance, is so important to me. I'm going to use whatever little bit of power that I have to try and do my part to support my political party. Well, this is why the Project 2025, it's not what you've been told. Project 2025 is a conservative effort to roll back the administrative state. It's also a conservative effort to fill the what is going to remain of federal agencies with conservative people. Now, the conservatism, let's just look at the two worldviews in the most simple way. To do all the things that the left wants to do, it requires more authoritarianism. It takes massive amounts of government control. It takes huge government entities to do those things. To do what the conservatives want to do, which is to roll back the federal government, to restore rights to the people, to increase our freedoms and liberties and get us away from an administrative state, it requires less control, less government, less authoritarianism, more free will, more individual choices and decisions. That's it. It's as simple as that. And, there's a huge push. Politics has become so important to people. And as a prime example of this, we can look at Tucker Carlson. I mean, Tucker Carlson just passed Joe Rogan as the number one podcast on Spotify, which is crazy. Joe Rogan with his $250 million, $240 million, whatever it was, contract on Spotify, the number one podcaster in the world. Tucker Carlson comes out, starts one, back in December, and now he's already passed Joe Rogan. People are hungry for information. And the information that they're getting, it's great that people are listening to Tucker, but the political side of things is driving a lot more of people's day-to-day activities and their day-to-day conversations. And so that is influencing them in the performance of their duties, in particular when you talk about the federal government. I hope that made sense. Okay, so let's talk about Netanyahu's speech. I personally thought the speech was fantastic. I wished, when I was hearing him say it or speak it, I thought, you know what, I really wish we could get an impassioned speech like that that's that eloquent from one of our leaders, but that's not the point in time in history we are living in. Now, I'm not a huge Netanyahu lover. I'll be perfectly honest. He does some things well, he does some things poorly, but he was put in a losing situation regardless. He's put in a losing situation. He was attacked on October 7th. He had no choice but to go and seek, I guess you'd call it revenge, but justice, really, for his people, those that were slaughtered, the women, the children, the babies that were burned, the parents that were beheaded, the children that were beheaded, the rape and assault of innocents. He had no choice but to attack. And I applaud him for it. He was also going into an urban situation. Urban combat is horribly messy. Now, they say 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Now, we're getting that number from the Palestinian Authority. So when I hear numbers coming out of Gaza, I question them all the time. I question them all the time because they've lied to us on a loop, basically. Everybody remembers the hospital that 500 people were killed. And it turns out it was a parking lot and nobody was killed. Or it was somewhere in between. Either way, they're going to use the media who's already against the nation of Israel. They're going to use that media, Hamas, them being Hamas, is going to use it to try and damage them in the court of public opinion, which is very easy to do because they're Jewish people, they're Jewish in heritage, and they've been hated for centuries. But this is a difficult situation for him to be in. Could he be fighting the war better? Possibly. Now, he said in his address that they've sent millions of texts and millions of phone calls and dropped millions of pamphlets and leaflets trying to warn people before they attack, but they are against an enemy who willfully uses innocent civilians as human shields. You can do that all day long, and you're still going to have civilian casualties. But at the end of the day, he has to end this war by destroying Hamas, and it's going to take a while. I can't. This is fighting an insurgency, hiding behind schools and under hospitals and human shields. They are going door to door when they could level the place if they want to. They say this is a genocide. No, it's a very bad genocide if that's the case. Even at 39,000 people, you're talking about 1.6% of the population, and they have the military might to level all of Gaza, and they don't do it. But I'm glad to see, one thing I am glad to see is the anti-Semites, the ones that are actually anti-Semitic. You can disagree with the war and not be anti-Semitic. But some people have used this to fuel their hatred of the Jewish people, and I'm very glad to see it because now I know who to discredit on social media. Now I know who just has that kind of hate in their heart because there are certain things worthy of hate. I do not believe that the nation of Israel is worthy of our hate in that way. They can do things wrong. It's not saying that they're infallible. But, boy, keep the anti-Semitism. Goodness gracious. It is rampant on social media. It's wild. And I'm not going to call anybody out right now. Maybe I'll do when it gets bad enough, I'll do a video on it later. But there's a lot of serious social media personalities who absolutely hate the Jewish people. And there's some people who just have a differing opinion. Tucker Carlson, he was talking with Jim Rich, what's his name? The guy from Big and Rich, I believe. But either way, he had him on his podcast, and I only saw a short clip of it. They were talking about the Schofield Bible and how that has influenced our policy in Israel and the Middle East. Fine, you can believe that, and whatever. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. All I know is that Israel is an independent nation who was attacked, and where I differ with a lot of people, not with Tucker Carlson, because he doesn't believe we should be involved in it at all. And I agree, too. I believe we should sell them weapons, but I don't believe we should be pumping billions and billions of dollars into Israel because we don't have billions and billions of dollars to pump into Israel. I think we should sell them weapons, but we think we should be gifting them billions and billions of dollars that we do not have for another war in a country that is not America. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so now let's talk about the American border. So the Republican Party is tying the border around Kamala's neck because she was the border czar. Now, you may be thinking, I heard on MSNBC, or I heard on CBS, or I heard on ABC that Kamala Harris was never the border czar. Well, maybe if you listened to it recently, that's what you heard. Let's listen to this mashup I don't know who did this, but this was a great video.
Border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People gonna have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
Nothing is real, people. Nothing is real. If you are watching MSNBC, ABC, CBS, you are getting a carefully crafted narrative. And this is the same thing with when they swapped out President Biden. You got these talking points were handed out. They were emailed out to people. I'm certain of this. They were emailed out to all the Democratic, the representatives, to all the people that yap on social media and on these are not on social media, but on these news networks, day in and day out. Everybody got it. Biden is out. Kamala is in. Start pushing Kamala, because within a 24-hour period, the whole media establishment was pushing this new narrative about Kamala Harris, the lady who never received a single vote from a single voter in a primary, the lady who never polled above 1% when she was trying to become president of the United States. And she got the full weight of the deep state, of the left, of the federal government, of all these little entities that say, all right, we're pushing our overlord's message, to include defying fact and reality by saying she was never the border czar. She was never the border czar. Don't believe your lying eyes. And there you go. So straight from every single news outlet, where they were before Biden dropped out, because she was the border czar, she was the border czar, she was the border czar, to after Biden dropped out, she's never the border czar. She was never the border czar. She's never been the border czar. She wasn't responsible for the border. Golly, this is why we have to question absolutely everything. And now know why I'm so skeptical of everything I hear. You have to be the same. Be skeptical of what you hear, especially if it's coming out of the mouth of someone in the mainstream media. Man, crazy. All right, thank you all. That's all I'm going to cover for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. We're on X Locals, Rumble, and YouTube. And I'll see you in the next video. Love you guys.